Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it was sent to me by one of our admins who helped us with this translation. The translation reads like this. Hello, how are you, Brother Nash? Can you please post my own story? His hidden identity. So I was born and raised in a very small village near Durban, and it was almost a place where everyone knew everyone and we respected our traditions. Life, I can say, was very simple, but growing up, I always had these dreams of something big. I always wanted to be someone who was going to make it in life, considering the fact that I did come from a very poor family. So when my mom started going to church, then I started thinking that maybe all of this traditional stuff that we were doing, maybe that was the reason as to why we were poor. But when we were going to church, my world came crashing on me when I found my mom sleeping with the pastor. My dad was not at home at that time, so I had some movements. So I woke up and I thought that maybe there was someone who had been with. So when I heard some sounds, that was when I woke up thinking that someone was in my mom's bedroom, maybe a thief or something like that. When I opened the door, I found out that it was my mom and the pastor. Like, I can't wipe that image from my memory. From there on, I started hating everything that has to do with church. So I really wanted to escape the confines of rural life and experience the opportunities that lay in the cities. Worst of all, I was trying to run away from my mom, because whenever my dad will be at home, I'll be thinking like, so this is what my mom has been doing. So I wanted to go as far as possible, far away from home. I wanted to go to Johannesburg. It seemed like a place where I'll be able to make my dreams to come true, where people I knew made something out of themselves. It took me years to finally make that move. I saved every cent that I was earning from doing your odd jobs and babysitting for other neighbors. By the time that I turned 21, I had enough to make the journey. I left behind my mom, my family, my friends, and the only life that I had ever known. I was determined to start a new chapter. When I arrived in Johannesburg, everything felt exciting but overwhelming at the same time. The city was so fast, busy, filled with strangers. It was so different from home. At first, I stayed with a cousin who had moved here a few years earlier on, and she helped me to settle in. I found a job as a waitress in a restaurant in Santon, which was not that glamorous, but it was able to pay the bills, the money that I was getting. The money that I earned barely covered my rent and living expenses, and the excitement of city life started to wear off as reality now was setting in. Let me tell you something about Johannesburg. It is quite expensive to live in. I wanted more than just survival. I wanted to live the life that I had imagined, wearing nice clothes, having a beautiful car, even a comfortable apartment. But I quickly learned that the city was not as glamorous as it seemed from afar. I was actually struggling to keep up, and my dreams felt further away with each and passing day. It was around that time when I met the man whom I'll call Sipho, not his real name. He walked into the restaurant one afternoon wearing an expensive suit and smelling of money. He sat at one of my tables, and I noticed how everyone treated with respect, almost like he had this other air of authority around him, the kind that comes from people who are used to be in control and have cash. He was a regular, but we had never spoken much beyond the pleasantries until that day. After I took his order, he struck up a conversation asking me about myself, where I was from, what I was doing in the city. I was cautious at first, but there was something about him that made me to feel comfortable, like he understood the struggle of trying to make it in Johannesburg. By the end of his meal, he left me a huge tip, more than what I made in a week, and his business card. I was so excited when I was looking at his beautiful business card that he had given to me. The tip was the beginning of everything, so he became a frequent presence in my life. After that, he would come to the restaurant always giving me some gifts, and after serving him, he always gave me an extra tip. Always leaving generous tips and little gifts, a new phone here, a handbag there. Soon enough, he invited me out for drinks. At first, I hesitated. I knew the warnings: never get involved with someone who offers too much too soon. But the life that I wanted was right there in front of me, and it seemed as if he could give it to me. It was not pushy or forceful, just persistent in a way that made me to feel special. One night, after a few drinks at a fancy bar in Sandton, he offered me a ride home. I accepted, and that was the night that everything changed. From that point on, we were inseparable. It took me to places that I had only ever seen in magazines, luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, and exclusive parties. Sipho lived the life that I had always dreamt of, and he wanted to share it with me. For the first time, I was not just surviving, I was living. He moved into a beautiful apartment, and when I moved into that apartment, he told me that he could not stay with me, so he had tricked me, and he had moved me into that apartment in Morningside, furnished it with the finest things, and made sure that I never wanted for anything. I did quit my job at the restaurant because Sipho said, "You are with me now, you do not need to work like that anymore." I felt like I had finally made it, but nothing comes for free, I guess. I learned that soon enough. At first, this man, he was very supportive. He would do anything that I would ask him to do for me. When I was in pain, he made sure that he would cuddle with me throughout the night. I felt like his princess, and he was always charming and showering me with gifts. But as time went on, I started to notice that things were not okay. He became quite controlling in subtle ways. He would question who I was with. He was very jealous where I was going and what I was going to do. It wasn't long before he started telling me that the things that I was doing, I was like cheating on him, and he was like, "You do not need to go out with your friends, you need to stay home." He would say, his voice calm but firm. If I resisted, he would remind me of everything that he had given me: the apartment, the clothes, the lifestyle, and he'll be like, "Do you want to go back to that restaurant?" He would ask, as if he was the one who was my God now, and the answer was always the same: I could not go back to struggling, not after this. Then came the business deals. He was always surrounded by people, important people, wealthy men who seemed to make shady deals over drinks and private dinners. He introduced me to some of them, and they would shower me with compliments, telling him how lucky he was. I didn't think much of it until one day he asked me to entertain one of his business associates. He framed it as a favor, something small, something to help him out. I knew what he meant, and for the first time, I realized what I had gotten myself into. I refused at first, but his reaction terrified me. He did not yell, and he did not scream. He did not need to do that. His disappointment was like, "After everything that I have done for you." I felt trapped. For the first time in my life, that was when I had realized that being with a blesser whom you do not know where his wealth comes from, it is quite tricky and dangerous. I did not have anything to fall back on, and he had made me to resign. No experience, no what. I had no family, no job, no savings, and he made sure that I completely was dependent on him. So I did what he asked. Worst of all, whenever I would go with these blessers, if they were those type of blessers that are not involved in ukutwala rituals, it was far much better. Some of these men that he would hand me over to them, these were men that would have snakes as their belts, and some of them, they would be having strange creatures in their bedroom. I could not refuse. I once made love to an Indian man who had a snake, a big python snake, in his bed. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. Even though I was trapped in luxury, I started drinking heavily. That is when I became an alcoholic. I was trying to numb the pain. He did not even care. I had sold my soul almost to the devil, and I was paying the price. It took me years until one night, after another painful favor, I realized that I could not do it anymore. With the little money that I had, for a time I left Johannesburg and I returned back home. I did not even have anything. This was after I had spent the night with a man who was from DRC, a man that I can't even remember anymore. And after I had slept with that man, I only realized in the morning that this man, he was not using any condoms throughout the night. When I returned back home, I can say that about a month later, that was when I started to feel really weird. And then one of my friends said, why don't you go to the pharmacy and buy a preg test? I went and I bought, and I found out that I was pregnant. So I was impregnated by a man who is from DRC, whom I do not even remember. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our sister who did this translation for us. Strange things indeed, they do happen in this world.